The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office in downtown Seattle, a rhythmic, relentless sound that usually helped me focus. I am Brooke, a 34-year-old senior risk management consultant. My entire career is built on the philosophy of early detection identifying the hairline fracture in a corporate merger before it causes a total collapse. I am paid to be cynical, to be thorough, and to never take a balance sheet at face value. Yet, for 15 years, I had treated my family's financial stability as an unquestionable truth. I sat at my desk, the blue light of my laptop illuminating the ruins of my personal life. I had discovered the anomaly while applying for a simple pre-approval on a vacation home. The loan officer had called me with a voice full of hesitation. "Ms. Vance, we're seeing some significant revolving debt for properties in Florida, 3 luxury vehicle leases, and several high-interest business loans for Advance Heritage Consulting. I don't own property in Florida. I drive a 5-year-old SUV that is fully paid for. And I certainly don't own a consulting firm with my parents. I spent the last 6 hours digging through the dark web of my own identity. My parents, David and Eleanor, had been using my social security number since the day I turned 18. They had opened credit cards in my name while I was in college, paying them off just enough to keep the accounts active while they ballooned the limits. When I started making a high salary in my late 20s, they didn't celebrate my success. They used it as collateral. They had built a life of retired elegance in a gated community in Sarasota, all while my name was attached to nearly $1.2 million in undisclosed liabilities. The Advance Heritage Consulting firm was a shell company. They used to funnel my credit into their lifestyle, the country club memberships, the European cruises, the designer wardrobes. They hadn't just borrowed my money, they had harvested my future. I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of water. I drove 3 hours to their summer home, a cottage I had helped them buy, or so I thought. I now realized even the down payment for this house had been skimmed from a line of credit they took out in my name during my wedding. When I walked through the front door, the house smelled of expensive cedar and aged wine. My mother was sitting in the sunroom, draped in a silk kaftan, looking at a travel brochure for a safari. My father was at the wet bar, pouring a glass of 20-year-old scotch. "Brooke, what a surprise," my father said, his voice smooth and untroubled. "We weren't expecting you until the weekend. We were just planning our October trip." I didn't say a word. I walked to the dining table and dropped the 50-page credit report. It landed with a heavy, final thud. "Sarasota," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The Mercedes, the consulting firm." "How long, Dad?" The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. My mother didn't look up from her brochure. My father took a slow sip of his scotch, his eyes never leaving mine. There was no shame in his expression, only a cold, calculating annoyance that the secret was out. "We did it for the family, Brooke," he said finally. "You were doing so well. Your credit limit was astronomical. We were just using the tools available to us to maintain the lifestyle the Vance name deserves. You never wanted for anything as a child. This is just a redistribution of assets." A redistribution. I felt a surge of nausea. "You forged my signature on a mortgage for a beach house I've never seen. You've put me in a position where I could be arrested for bank fraud. I'm an auditor, Dad. My career depends on my integrity, and you've turned me into a primary suspect in a $1 million identity theft scheme." "Don't be dramatic," my mother snapped, finally looking at me. Her eyes were sharp and devoid of any maternal warmth. "You have a massive salary. You can afford the payments. We were going to pay them down eventually, but the market shifted. You're our daughter. Your success is our success. That's how family works. Family works on trust," I said, my voice rising. "This is a crime. I'm giving you 24 hours to sell the Florida properties and the cars, and to sign a full confession that I can take to the banks to clear my name." My father laughed a dry, hollow sound. "We aren't signing anything, Brooke, and we aren't selling. If you report this, you'll be dragging your own parents through the mud. Think of the scandal. Think of what it would do to your risk management reputation if the world found out you couldn't even manage your own parents. You'll be ruined right along with us." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It's a reality," he replied, turning back to the bar. "Now, why don't you go back to the city, calm down, and we can discuss a repayment plan over Christmas? We're family, Brooke. You won't actually hurt us." I looked at them, 2 people I had loved and supported. 2 people who had spent 15 years treating my identity like a limitless resource. They thought I was trapped by my own success. They thought I would value my reputation more than the truth. They forgot one thing. As a risk consultant, I don't just identify problems, I mitigate them. And the most effective way to mitigate a total loss is to cut the dead weight before it pulls the ship under. I walked out of the house without another word. I didn't go home. I went to a hotel, opened my laptop, and began the process of corporate liquidation. They thought they were the owners of Vance Heritage Consulting. They forgot that since the firm was opened in my name, using my social security number and my home address as the registered office, I was the sole legal owner. They were merely unauthorized agents. I logged into the business's bank portal. I didn't just freeze the accounts. I transferred the remaining $140,000 in liquid assets into a secure escrow account under my legal counsel's name. Then, I initiated a report of unauthorized activity for every single credit line. I wasn't just clearing my name. I was taking back the kingdom they had built on my back. And I was starting with the roof over their heads. My hands gripped the edges of the hotel desk, the plastic molding digging into my palms as I stared at the flashing cursor on my screen. She is my mother. She is the woman who held my hand through every childhood fever, the one who picked out my first professional suit, the one who told me I could conquer the world. He is my father. He is the man who taught me that advance never quits, the one whose approval I chased for 34 years. We are the same blood, the same history. My stomach knotted into a tight, agonizing ball. Hot tears finally broke and scalded my cheeks, and my breath caught in a sharp, jagged sob. How can I do this to them? How can I be the daughter who puts her own parents on the street? How can I burn down the only family I have? But they didn't see a daughter when they looked at me. They saw a credit limit. They took my name, the very identity they gave me, and used it as a weapon to hollow out my life. They bet on my love for them being stronger than my love for the truth. They struck first. I had no choice. I wiped the tears away with the back of my hand, the warmth leaving my face and being replaced by the clinical, detached coldness of a risk auditor. I wasn't Brooke the daughter anymore. I was Brooke the creditor. I didn't wait for the 24 hours to expire. My father's arrogance had shown me that mercy would only be interpreted as a weakness to be exploited. I picked up the phone and called the fraud department of the primary lender for the Sarasota property. Because I was the owner of the identity, the security protocols dissolved instantly once I provided the high-level authentication codes. I am reporting the mortgage on the Florida property as a fraudulent transaction initiated through identity theft, I said, my voice as steady as a stone. I have already filed the initial police report. I am also informing you that the authorized signatory on the account, David Vance, has no legal standing to access these funds. I did the same for the luxury vehicle leases. One by one, I pulled the plugs. I contacted the security firm for the gated community in Sarasota and revoked the guest passes for the occupants of the house. By the time the sun began to peek over the Seattle skyline, I had systematically dismantled the digital fortress my parents had lived in for 15 years. I drove back to the summer cottage at 8:00 a.m. The air was crisp and the dew was still heavy on the grass. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw a black sedan idling at the curb. The repossession agent I had authorized through the car's GPS tracking system. I walked into the house. The smell of expensive cedar was gone, replaced by the sharp, metallic temps of tension. My father was standing in the kitchen, his face a mask of purple rage, clutching a dead cordless phone. My mother was sitting on the stairs, her silk kaftan wrinkled, looking at her deactivated smartphone as if it had betrayed her. "What have you done?" my father roared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "The bank. They froze everything. The cars won't start. The club called and said our membership has been suspended, pending investigation." "Brooke, have you lost your mind? We are your parents. You are my identity thieves," I said, leaning against the doorframe. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I've spent the night doing what I do best, mitigating risk. The Sarasota house is being seized. The cars are being towed, as we speak. And I've already sent a full evidentiary packet to the district attorney's office. "You're going to jail us." My mother shrieked, her voice hitting a pitch I had never heard before. "For a few houses, for some clothes, we gave you life, Brooke. We gave you everything. You gave me a social security number that you intended to use as your personal ATM until the day I died," I countered. "You didn't give me life. You gave me a debt I never signed for. I'm not jailing you, Mom. Your own greed is doing that. I'm just providing the documentation." My father stepped toward me, his hand raised as if to strike, but he stopped when he saw the look in my eyes. He realized then that I wasn't the responsible one who would clean up his mess. I was the one who was going to make him pay for it. "I'm offering you one final exit," I said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the kitchen island. A voluntary surrender of all assets. You sign over the titles to the remaining properties. You sign the confession for the bank fraud, and you move out of this cottage by noon today. In exchange, I will tell the DA that I am satisfied with the restitution and won't push for the maximum sentence. You'll get a suspended sentence and probation instead of a decade in a cell. And where are we supposed to go? My mother sobbed. We have nothing. You've taken everything. You have exactly what you had before you started stealing from me, I said. Nothing. You can find a rental. You can find jobs. You can live the humble life you always told me was so noble when I was growing up. They signed. They didn't have a choice. Watching them pack their designer suitcases into a cab 2 hours later was the hardest thing I've ever done. My mother didn't look at me as she left. My father gave me a look of such pure, concentrated hatred that I felt the last chord of my childhood love snap for good. I didn't feel like a winner as the cab pulled away. I felt like an orphan. But over the next 6 months, the weight began to lift. I worked with the banks to scrub the $1.2 million from my record. It took hundreds of hours of paperwork, dozens of interviews with fraud investigators, and a total overhaul of my financial life, but my credit score slowly climbed back from the grave. I sold the Sarasota house and used the proceeds to pay off the remaining high-interest loans they'd taken out. I kept the summer cottage. I stripped out the expensive cedar and the aged wine. I repainted the walls a soft, clean white. I turned the sunroom into a library, a place of quiet and truth. I don't hear from them anymore. Sometimes I get a collect call from a number I don't recognize, and I simply press decline. I heard through a cousin that they're living in a small apartment in a town 3 states away, working entry-level retail jobs. My father apparently tells everyone he meets that his daughter is a cold-blooded corporate shark who betrayed her own flesh and blood. I don't mind the title. In my world, a shark is just a predator that keeps the ecosystem clean. I am Brooke Vance. I am a risk manager. And for the first time in my life, my future is a balanced sheet. Now I live in peace and they finally learned their lesson.